Gotta be moving for the camera, please. There we go. All right, so reviewers are counting out the M2 MacBook Air, and you might be surprised that this 2-year-old M1 MacBook Air makes this a weird middle child of a laptop. But you know what's even more weird today? Our sponsor, Nobody. Other than my wallet, of course. And no, I'm not talking about Ridge Wallet. The sponsor really is Nobody. Now, let's just get this right out the way. The reason why I kept this laptop here, the M2 MacBook Air, is because, as shameful as this sounds, I missed the return window because I was on vacation and now I'm stuck with this laptop. And the only reason I use the M2 MacBook Air is for catching up on One Piece because the display is pretty good, and so are the speakers. I mean, I did that on vacation in a relaxing tub on the Fold 3, but yeah, back to the weird middle child. Now, unlike reviewers who got the product early with 16 gigabytes of RAM, 512 gigabytes of storage, the commoners, the masses, the my pockets aren't so deep crowd, like myself, I purchased the base model with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. Now, it's important not to have your expectations set so high because I think everyone in the tech community wanted the M2 MacBook Air and just the M2 chip overall to be this massive leap from Apple once again. And it was probably the most popular reason why most people skipped out on M1 the first 2 years is because the next cycle of chips were supposed to be better. Just not quite. You see, the problem with Apple is that they came out the gate too strong, which is the M1 lineup in general. I mean, each product that Apple has put out in the past 2 years have been jaw-dropping, and now, 2 years later, we have M2. And it might sound like I'm taking a lot of hits on this laptop because I missed a return window, which is a little biased, but you might be asking yourself, well, since I get to keep this now, I must be using it all the time. Wrong. Even though all my files are transferred, it's the flashy, shiny thing, and I still have my amazing wallpapers, I'm still pretty loyal to M1. And it's because the differences aren't that noticeable once you start bouncing between the two. Get it? M2, bouncing between the two. Yeah, dry jokes sound so bad when you say them out loud. Anyway, let's keep moving on with this review. So let's talk about the controversy briefly because I already have an entire 20-minute unedited video about my thoughts on the SSD issue, and after having this laptop, most of my thoughts have remained the same. And I'll sum it up in this statement here. If you have large files or you're working on a large-scale professional environment, the Air machine was just never made for you from the get-go. However, Apple, this message is for you directly. You shouldn't make your base drives dramatically worse because when your system does memory swap, because it will, the performance hit can be jarring with drives that are nearly 50% slower. Because this thing also memory swaps, but since the SSD drive is much faster, the performance hit isn't as noticeable as on the M2 machine. And I think everyone is so caught up about this SSD issue that we as a community have let Apple still get away with charging $200 for storage increases. Now, let's talk about this laptop in a general sense. In typical Apple fashion, we get a MagSafe cable and a charging block. Depending on the color you choose, you get a matching braided cable, so seems like Apple's going back to their fun days of the late 90s and early 2000s instead of the whole black and white masquerade, which I will admit provides a clean look, but colors are hard to pass up. Now, most of the laptop is more or less the same as M1, most of them being around the design. So in addition to the 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, Apple brought back MagSafe. And for one, the outside body is flat instead of the taper design we have on the older model. And I've gone back and forth a lot between the two. And I've got to say, I actually prefer the older design. And it's simply because the M1 MacBook Air is just superior with the slight level off when it comes towards you. And it just makes it better for longer typing sessions. Now, the speakers are in the midsection of the laptop right here. So they sort of bounce off the screen and into your face. The webcam is also better in most well-lit lighting conditions. The function row is bigger. The trackpad is bigger. The Apple logo is also bigger. The battery is bigger as well. We're not done yet. The display is also slightly bigger with a notch at the top. So it looks like you're almost staring into the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Now, despite everything I said about the M2 MacBook Air is bigger and better, you'd think Apple would use the same reasoning when it comes to cooling the chip itself. Sort of. Now, I don't want to get bogged down in this section with too many technical details, but this chip, I keep looking at this, but I'm supposed to be looking at this right here. This chip right here, M2, is better than M1, no questions asked. Yes, it runs hotter, but it's faster and better in every way. And with faster chips, you need to cool them properly, and that's where the shortcomings of the M2 Air lie. Just because this doesn't have a fan, you still have to cool it some way, you dunce. So let's talk about controversy number dos, thermal throttling. Now, even with M1, this chip thermal throttled, but I think most reviewers couldn't see the forest through the trees. If you don't know what that saying is, neither do I. I just looked up that phrase and I think it fits the situation, so I'm gonna go with it. And it's as if they just saw the views and sub counts go up, but let's take a trip down memory lane. Remember when M1 came out and we were all happy, we were in the streets celebrating that this is a new coming of Apple? I actually wanted to fly home and tell my parents, Apple's back, Apple's back, Apple's back. Except wait, the M1 MacBook Air thermal throttled a lot. Like, a lot. The only difference back then was the comparisons were other $1,000 Windows laptops, which the M1 Air still beat while throttled. And the M2 Air is no different, except now we have AMD and Intel chips that are much better. And as stupid as it sounds, we are comparing the M2 chip with the M1 Pro level chips. And here lies the middle child. Now, the M2 MacBook Air is a fantastic machine, don't get me wrong. It's just, in terms of pricing, there are better options. The M1 MacBook Air, for example, no matter what upgrades you put towards M2, the M1 Air, it will always be cheaper, and for bursty workloads, which is what most of the things people are going to be doing on this machine, you won't notice the difference. And the price of the M1 Air here in the US starts as low as $850. And for that price, I wouldn't even bat an eye at M2 at all. But you might ask yourself, what about the colors? The midnight, the starlight. And I can't believe I'm gonna say this because this pretty much goes against everything I believe in, but you're better off getting like a $20 laptop I can't even speak. You're better off getting a $20 laptop cover from Amazon. I can't believe I actually just said that out loud. That's why I struggled. But yes, money is better well spent there. And to be honest, you probably have a lot more customization as well. Now, Dbrand is worldwide and has way more options to choose from, like this leather skin here. No, this is not sponsored. Seriously, this isn't sponsored. Dbrand. Now you still might be saying, well, I want M2 no matter what, but I want what the reviewers had because that's what they're recommending me. 16 gigabytes of RAM, 512 gigabytes of storage, which fair enough. You know, we all have our wants in life. The problem is when you start adding in $400 here in the US or some absurd amount overseas, you're knocking at the door of the M1 Pro, which is just superior in every way. And I'm not going to list out all the categories that the 14-inch MacBook Pro is better in because it's just a better machine in every category, period. Like I said, this, in terms of pricing, has the unwanted middle child. And this is what happens when you have a good product stack with absurd pricing in storage. But the only reason I can actually recommend the M2 MacBook Air is if the difference is so large between the M2 MacBook Air upgraded versus the M1 Pro then pull the trigger, or if you just gotta have the midnight or starlight color. Or last category, if you just want the latest and greatest by Apple. And I'm gonna end my review with this. Why do I use the M1 MacBook Air so much despite the M2 being newer, sexier, better sounding, better performing, better battery life, midnight grade laptop in front of me? And the answer is pretty simple. I'm of the people and I follow my own advice. And if I recommend the M1 Air over the M2 Air, I'm gonna use the M1 Air. Anyway, guys, I appreciate every single sub, like, and comment. And as always, guys, much love. I don't really think I talked about anything technical in this review. It was more just like my personal feelings. So hopefully you found something informative. I'm out. Why is the background for this video in some snowy Siberian place? This isn't Siberia. Where are we at? Traveling over, yeah, we're going.